As Vegito surpassed the powers of the gods of destruction within Dragon Ball Super, welcome Dragon Ball fans to another Dragon Ball Super discussion video, where today I am joined by two very special guests to tackle the subject of if Vegito has indeed surpassed the powers of the gods, first being my good friend Dyspo and lastly but certainly not least, a new guest onto the channel, a very talented man who was once a voice actor for Dragon Ball Epsilon. Please welcome DevilArtemis. And again, if you guys have any opinions of your own, if your opinion differs than ours, go on ahead and comment down below as to if you guys feel Vegito has indeed surpassed the powers of the gods of destruction. Now boys, today I want to focus primarily on Beerus, since Beerus is what I believe to be the benchmark of the gods of destruction so far being shown in Dragon Ball Super, since he is one of the only gods that we saw fight within Dragon Ball Super. So I want to start off with DevilArtemis, and I want to ask you personally, do you feel, based on the manga, based on what we saw in the anime, in your opinion, do you believe that Vegito in his Super Saiyan Blue form has exceeded the powers of the Hakaishins that we've seen in Dragon Ball Super?
Well, what's interesting to see is, there's evidence on both sides.
Right.
There's evidence in the anime and the manga. Personally, flat out, I believe that Vegito has surpassed Beerus, and I only say this because in the anime, Gowasu and the Supreme Kai, they go on to say that, oh, we've never seen a power so terrifying before, and I quote, they say his standing as a god is far beyond even their understanding.
Comparing that to Merge Zamasu, correct?
Right.
Yes.
When they're seeing Merge Zamasu after he gets his halo, not just when he first appears, when the halo appears.
Yes, the Ring of Light.
Yes. Back. Yeah. So they obviously, they've met Beerus. They know Beerus's power. So the fact that they claim that Merge Zamasu, he didn't just fuse. They say, his power expanded to infinite amounts. It just makes Merge Zamasu seem like he's this insane god and he's put on this pedestal. And then here we have Vegito Blue, who just comes in and completely just destroys Merge Zamasu off this pedestal. And that just leads me to believe that if Merge Zamasu has this incomprehensible amount of power that would have passed Beerus, Vegito will obviously be stronger than Beerus.
Especially in comparison to Merge Zamasu, because when he was first introduced, we saw how Shin and Gowasu were talking about, as you said, his power was immeasurable, and he claimed to be the perfect god, the only god that should exist. And what's funny to me is, based on the recent manga chapter, we saw how Shin suggested that perhaps Vegito has become so powerful that he even exceeds the power of the gods, based on just him having to unleash his power in the form of a final Kamehameha, and before he even unleashed the attack. In comparison to the anime, in the manga he wasn't even able to do so because he had so much power that he defused the moment he was even about to unleash the attack. So I personally believe that the potential is there, and having to look at where Vegito stands, I'm gonna have to say that I agree, and I think that Vegito does supersede the powers of Beerus, even though I believe that Emish disagrees. Emish, I want to know your thoughts on this subject, and if you believe that Vegito has surpassed Beerus. If not, why do you believe that is?
All right, so what's up, everyone? Thanks for having me yet again. This is a very sensitive topic, so I'm just going to be flat out honest, and this is just my opinion. Vegito is probably one of my favorite, I would say my favorite fusion in Dragon Ball history. But Beerus is, and I'll be honest, Beerus is probably one of my favorite characters in Dragon Ball Super as a whole, but that doesn't, conflict with how I feel about him as a fighter, or in terms of him being, how powerful he is, right? So with that out of the way, I do disagree. And this isn't about whether or not you like Vegito, whether or not you like Beerus,
Yes.
There's certain things that we have to take into consideration. One key factor is the fact that they never really allowed Beerus to go into that timeline to take care of the job anyway. That was specifically done so that way they could reintroduce Vegito as a fan service, okay? On top of that, they did that to allow people to feel that love that they once had for Vegito to begin with. Now, when we look at Fusion as a whole, Fusion characters have never been the deciding factor as to whether or not the job will get done.
Yes.
Whether it be in a fight, whether it be in anything. They have never once gotten the job done.
With the exception of Gogeta when he fought Janemba, but that's movie.
But that's like
movie
in the
material.
movie,
Yes,
stuff
yes.
like, right. But even then, if you want to go into GT territory, once again, he never really, he was more than capable of destroying Omega Shenron, but he never did it. Yes, came down to it because of how powerful he was. The fusion wore off. Similarly, very similarly to what happened in Super, where Vegito was just too damn strong that they, the powers of the Potara, which are strictly bound to Kaioshin, I think that's another factor that we're overlooking. According to Dragon Ball Super, the Potawa were never meant to be used by other beings other than Kaioshin. Right. And Kaioshin, as a nature, they don't get that strong, except for Zamasu. He was a protege. But even then, like in the manga, they reference how the Potawa will not work for after a certain amount of time because he merged with someone who is not a Kaioshin, right? And when they did the merge Zamasu fusion, right? So you got Black Goku, who wasn't really a Kaioshin. Then you got Zamasu, who just, stole the earrings and stuff like that. Another thing to take into consideration here is the fact that they had the Potara when they were originally introduced anyway. So the fact that Goku Black went to the extent of arriving at a specific timeline where Beerus no longer existed, okay, after knowing that even after he met Zamasu, it was already established that they understand that they're both Kais. They know they can both fuse at any moment. They chose not to because the Zero Mortals plan at that point and that essence in time was much more important than just fusing right away.
Right.
They needed Goku Black to get to a certain strength level, ergo Super Saiyan Rose. While Zamasu did absolutely nothing. He didn't need to be strong because he had the powers of immortality. He had that ability, right? So that was it. So when you look at the anime or when you look at the manga, there's two different scenarios happening. Either way, though, they avoided Beerus as a whole. In the anime, we kind of got hints that maybe Beerus would go into the future timeline to handle the job. He clearly said he can easily destroy Zamasu if, he was able to go to the timeline, but, they're not capable of time hopping and stuff like that. The fact that Beerus, I don't personally see a matchup between Beerus and Zamasu ever happening. So then to base the strength level of Vegito on the simple fact that he's capable of beating the shit out of Zamasu, as to where Beerus has the simple ability of Hakkaiing someone, it's a different scenario because you're putting Vegito versus Zamasu and then using that outcome to determine who's stronger between Vegito versus Beerus, right? But a matchup of that magnitude would more than likely not happen. So the conversation, there's a lot of doors that open up here. In terms of overall power, I have said before, I'm not sure if I've said on one of Alex's videos or maybe on the Discord server, that as a whole, we have that the God tier class was introduced for a certain reason. So we have the mortals, and Goku arguably probably being the strongest mortal in the multiverse at the time of this video, right? No one can argue with that, right? Okay. Then you have the mortals. Now the limit for the mortals, it stops at the Hakkaishin, the gods of destruction, right? The mortals will never reach a strength level or overall power output level of an Hakkaishin, right? Then you have the Hakkaishins are limited by the angels. Then the angels are limited by the Grand Priest Daishinkan. Then the Grand Priest Daishinkan is limited by the Omni King. It works in that way for a reason.
That's the pecking order, correct? Yes.
Right, and that's why they never introduced Beerus in their future timeline because it would have fucked up the natural order of things. Ergo, they put Vegito in a timeline that wasn't even relevant to the actual canon of the story.
But to counter the argument with Beerus being able to destroy Zamasu, I don't think that there is any doubt for that. But I think that having to reference Zamasu when he wasn't merged in comparison to how he would react if he saw the merger would be a different scenario, because then maybe he did have the power to completely obliterate Black and Zamasu on his own, but when putting them together, I think the overall outcome would have been a little bit more different and a little bit more difficult, because even though the scaling was different from the Battle of Gods movie to the Battle of Gods arc, as we saw in Super, because the whole 70% usage of Beerus and whatnot, that's been over and done with. So now we're looking at two different tiers, as when we saw the Kaioshin, as they recognized Zamasu and Black at first, and when they had confidence in Goku and Vegeta having to defeat them, until when they came together. Even when they came together, the powers and post-training of both Goku and Vegeta, after training deliberately with each other and on Beerus's planet within the time chamber for about, I think it was 3 years, and having to combine that together, I think that, as you said, the mortals, they possibly can't, even comprehend or reach a power similar to the gods of destruction, because that even goes back to Akira Toriyama. He doesn't plan on making Goku and or Vegeta stronger than Beerus as of, said interview. But as of now, I think that the potential of combining two Super Saiyan Blues, and not even counting the fact that the Potaras couldn't even sustain their powers, because even while they were fighting Merge Zamasu, I think that we can all agree here that they didn't really try as hard as they could, because if they did, they have the abilities of Kaioken. They have, the merger and the masking of both, Vegeta's abilities and Goku's into one being, into one body. So if they really would have emit more energy into their being and put out more, I think that obviously enough their fusion would have, you know, wore out a lot quicker, as we saw when he put all of his energy into the final Kamehameha. But Artemis, I want to get your thoughts on what Emis just said in regards to that, because having a look at Beerus, we haven't, and probably so, we'll never really see what, you know, Beerus is truly capable of, because as of now, as of this recording, we're at the Tournament of Power. It's about to begin, and we've only seen Beerus fight technically like 3 times. We saw him fight Goku, we saw him fight Goku again in the Monaco suit, and then we saw him fight Champa. So is there any argument that you can present, or any of your own opinions that you can say that would disprove this and say that Vegito could go toe-to-toe against Beerus in terms of power, even if so, probably best him in that respect?
Well, first I want to say there's a lot of flaws that Vegito has.
Okay.
And whether we're considering that we're talking about canon or non-canon, one big problem that we seem to have every time that these people fuse, aside from Gogeta that fought Janemba, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and Vegito seems to be playful. He wastes a lot of time. He likes to... It's kind of that scenario where we have a Super Vegeta versus a Semi-Perfect Cell, where it's cockiness versus arrogance.
Yes.
And I feel like Vegito wastes his time with Zamasu, and that cost him the battle. So if we were going to put raw power in terms of intellect, I feel like Lord Beerus might be outclassed, but he will probably win the battle only because Vegito, he just doesn't have the mentality. I feel like he'll waste a lot of time and just, I mean, now obviously he knows his time limit, but if we're talking, you know, fresh off the bat, he just fused, he's turning Super Saiyan Blue, he won't have the time to keep up with Beerus. He'll burn through the fusion before he even wins. I think personally, through my opinion, only because of what I know from Merge Zamasu's capabilities and from what I've seen Beerus. I mean, what Beerus has over Vegito, I guess, is, you know, his destruction technique, his Hakai, where he just erases things from existence. Other than that, I mean, there's nothing really that I can use to compare, because both characters we haven't seen enough out of. We haven't seen Vegito since the Majin Buu saga. You know, and the manga has less evidence than the anime. The manga is just, you know, he's charging up his final Kamehameha. He can't even launch it. The fusion diffuses before he even fires a final Kamehameha.
And Shin was shocked because he said, wow, the amount of energy input into that, you know, one technique, he couldn't even use it because he was so strong and it just burned right through.
So how is he going to fight against Beerus? I mean, he might be more powerful than Beerus. I mean, the Supreme Kai only assumes, you know, like, oh, his level is his power level is probably greater than Beerus's, but it just won't last. He can't even. But considering
how they viewed Zamasu when he first came into, you know, his being, and when they spoke about how he was immeasurable and incomprehensible in terms of like what they were looking at, and seeing Vegito take that and completely mop the floor with how Shin and Gowasu were viewing Zamasu, is the potential of Vegito surpassing Beerus in power true or false in your opinion? Because I'm gonna have to say, putting 2 Super Saiyan Blues together with that kind of magnitude and experience, I would have to say they do surpass Beerus. But as you said, there's no way to really tell, because even if they did fight in a one-on-one fight, if Vegito would have pushed those boundaries, he would defuse. So what do you think about that?
Well, if we're not considering the part of the defusion and the separation of Goku and Vegeta, and we're comparing from what we know of Vegito's feat, is that he is stronger than a god whose power is comparable to that of infinity, right? So Merge Zamasu has it's comparable to infinite. It has what's the quote that they said?
When they
power expanded. His power expanded to infinite amounts. That's what they said. That's the quote. His power has expanded into infinite amounts, or something like that. Okay. If Merge Zamasu is comparable to infinite in terms of power, or a body that will just get stronger and stronger, and Vegito mops the floor with him, if we're not considering the fact that they're going to separate, I think that it is true that Vegito will mop the floor with Beerus. If we're not considering the defusion, that's my opinion. I think that's definitely what would happen.
Anish, what do you have to add on to this? Do you believe that this is?
I personally feel a better matchup would probably be in terms of describing or comparing Beerus to Merge Zamasu, if anything. The reason I say that, again, it goes back to what I said about mortals never really not being able to surpass the Hakaishin. You have to take into consideration the fact that the Hakaishin have lived for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. I would imagine that they've trained for at least half of that with angels who are far more significantly stronger than they can ever hope to be.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Then you have to also take into consideration the fact that when we see Vegito and when we see Vegito and Murzumasu fight, even if Vegito's not trying, Murzumasu was putting a lot of effort in there. Okay, and whether or not someone wants to bring up the argument about ki control, that's a different. You can even bring that up. But the fact that since you mentioned Beerus and Champa fighting each other, right, sparring with each other, right?
Yes.
That was literally just an exchange of a couple punches and kicks, and the entire planet was about to be ripped to shreds.
Tornadoes and earthquakes.
And it has nothing to do with ki control. It's more so about how powerful these two forces are clashing when they're clashing together. Okay, so when you take that into consideration, then you compare a matchup of Vegito versus Zamasu, because they are mortals and they will never be on a god tier level. That is why we have a sparring match between two Hakaishin versus an all-out battle between two actual beings, right? A Kaioshin and a mortal, and we don't get the same drastic or over-exaggerated consequences as to what happens when two Hakaishin fight. That alone is a clear indication of how strong Beerus and Champa, forget Beerus, maybe even just a general Hakaishin could be. Because now then you also have to, it's not fair to just say, well, we haven't seen enough from Beerus. You have to take into consideration the fact that Beerus and the Hakaishin were designed this way. They're OP, they're overpowered by no means. Like, you can't even fathom how overpowered they are. And because they're designed this way, it's more than probable that we will not see what they're capable of, because just two of them sparring with each other erases everything under their feet. So that is a clear indication that they are designed just to say, okay, well, we already saw what he did to Super Saiyan 3 Goku. We've seen what he did to Super Saiyan God, but then that's Battle of Gods. We've seen him just erase Zamasu. We've seen him erase the Ghost. We've seen generally what Beerus is capable of. Okay, the fact that he can flick Goku, and you can argue, okay, well, Goku wasn't as strong as he was now. The point is, he flicked him away. Like, that's a big problem. Like, so you have to take into consideration the thousands and tens of thousands of years that Beerus has undergone training versus a new fusion of Vegito Blue, right? After, they power up its new character. It's Vegito, we remember him, but Vegito Blue is a fresh new, it's something fresh. But that's why they introduced Vegito in that timeline, and they never allowed Beerus to go to that timeline because of they feared that maybe, okay, well, if Murzumasu is this strong and Beerus has to fight Murzumasu, where does that put Goku now? Where when people are interviewing Toriyama, asking him if there's any plans to make Goku as strong as Beerus someday, and the fact that he said no, that's never going to happen back at that time, conflicts with the fact as to why they didn't put Beerus in the future timeline to begin with, because he would have just simply went there, Hakai'd it, and that would have been that. But the reason they did that was to give Vegito a much needed fan service, but once again, failing to finish the job. Once again, it tells you, and even if you want to say, okay, well, what if the fusion was permanent?
Right.
You still have to take into consideration the amount of training, the intellect, the knowledge that Beerus has as a Hakaishin. And imagine what would happen if Beerus, as a god of destruction, went at 100% versus anybody. Forget another god of destruction, but 100% versus anybody.
Absolutely.
I personally don't think we would get a revamp of what happened in Battle of Gods where Goku could cancel him out, because that was already retconned. The 70% Beerus was already retconned, so you cannot use that argument again. Yeah. So that's why I think a better comparison may be to do a merge Zamasu versus Beerus, and then we can, because they're both gods.
But having to go back and look at, I don't know if you guys remember when Vegeta first trained with Goku on Beerus's planet, and Whis was observing the first time their fists collided, and we saw the blue spark and aura that was of Super Saiyan Blue. Whis said something very interesting, and I quote, he said, "It's amazing to see how far these two have come in such a short amount of time. Now I see why Beerus has taken an interest in both of these Saiyans." So within a very short time, they even exceeded Whis' expectations in having to not only reach a new level of power during that time when they first unlocked Super Saiyan Blue. But even after he pointed out that their ki was leaking out, they were improving at such a fast rate together as individuals that, to me, if they were able to surprise someone like Whis during that time as individuals, having to combine that during a time where they've already moved way past that into the Goku Black story, and seeing how strong they were in Dragon Ball Z when they fought Buhan in comparison now to when Vegito, came back against Zamasu. Even going back and seeing how easily Vegito toyed with Buhan, similar to how he toyed around with Zamasu, it's hard to say that he wouldn't be as strong, even with the retcon having to be added into, the overall, play here, and having to say, okay, well, even if he is stronger, he would defuse, and that's true. I think that, let's say, hypothetically speaking, if Vegito were to come across Beerus at, I would say arguably both at 100% power, they would be either A, they would be evenly matched until he burns out through his fusion, which would be quick, or B, he would be stronger until, once again, the fusion just separates them, which is unfair to Vegito because, again, if it was permanent, it'd be different, and not even counting it be permanent, even if it lasted the full 60 minutes, considering the fact that even though Beerus does know of training methods and he's been around for millions of years and he has received training from deities such as Whis, and he does know about, the motions of his body and how to move, in a very specific order, it's hard to say that someone like Vegito wouldn't be able to learn from that during battle and catch up, because that's just the art of the Saiyans. They were able to grow during battle, after battle, and even someone like Goku learning while he's fighting someone. And I'll give you an example. When he fought Hit, he was learning about the Toki Tobashi and being able to even up that up while he was fighting him. So considering the fact that his essence and his being is a part of Vegito, to me, in my opinion, it's hard to say that Vegito doesn't surpass Beerus for a small time until his fusion burns out, even though I do still believe that Beerus is the benchmark for being an individual character. When it comes down to a fusion of two Super Saiyan Blues, it's hard to distinguish whether or not they would be weak, because having to combine both of their experiences and their moves and their abilities, to me, it just tells me that, and it gives me evidence that, seeing what they did before as individuals, combining that would put them at a whole different tier. So if anyone wants to add on to that.
Well, to be fair, it's Goku and Vegeta have been surprising the gods since the beginning of Dragon Ball.
A lot.
That's nothing, right? So that's nothing new. When Shin first came to Earth, he had no idea they were beings this strong. The fact that Gohan was the weakest of the Saiyans at that time, the fact that Gohan's energy was enough to fill up the Majin Buu gauge, that's more than what even Babidi had hoped to achieve at that point. Boris did the same thing. Shin didn't. When he saw Vegeta and Goku fight, he was like, "What the fuck? Where have I been this whole time?"
Yeah.
So when we go to the manga, and then we use Shin as a benchmark, even Gowasu, I don't even think Gowasu is fully aware as to what Beerus really is capable of. So I'm going to use Shin because Shin is his Kaioshin, right?
Right.
So Shin is very inexperienced. He's very inexperienced. That's been portrayed in the anime and it's been portrayed in the manga. We've seen it in Dragon Ball Z. We've seen it in Dragon Ball Super. Okay, we know Beerus is lazy, and we all know this. The fact that Beerus sleeps and he chooses to be lazy is representation as to how Shin decides to govern his universe. He wants the morals to develop on their own. As a response to that, Beerus turns out to be lazy because, well, my Kaioshin wants me to do this. I have to respect it. That's my job as a god of destruction, right? There's a lot of perks with this job, but guess what? I have to listen. I have to work with my Kaioshin. I can't just destroy him or do something to him, because harm to him causes harm to me. Yeah. That's why he sealed the Elder Kai in the Z Sword, because he just didn't want to deal with that shit anymore. And to protect himself, obviously, from any harm coming onto him, which tells me that he had the intention to stay and to be the strongest of his universe in the parallel timeline. But in this timeline, we don't have that. We have a Beerus who's lazy. We have a Beerus who just doesn't give a shit. And even then, you have to take into consideration the fact that Shin is very inexperienced. He's never been able to actually calculate just how strong someone is. He's always been surprised. He's always been like, well, what's going on here? That's why I don't think it's just fair to just take Shin's words for it. And when in terms of comparing the two, obviously, yes, he is capable of feeling God Ki or whatever. So yes, he can feel how strong Zamasu is. He can feel how strong Vegito Blue is, etc. I just don't think, when we use those aspects, it's not fair, because we've seen more from Vegito Blue and Goku and Vegeta than we ever will of Beerus, and that's just by design.
Right. Artemis, do you have anything to add on to that?
Well, I think the question that we have to answer in order to determine who would beat who would be the winner of the battle, we would probably have to find out where does Goku stand in terms of Beerus's power now, like in the power that he has now with Kaioken times 10.
Right.
If they ever touch upon the topic of them separated, like, oh, maybe Goku can put up a fight with Beerus, or say they come up with some bull crap like, oh, Goku in his Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 10 brings out like 30% of Beerus's max power, we'll get a better understanding in the future as to, we can always come back to a topic like this where like, oh, well, what if Goku was fused with Vegeta, Super Saiyan Blue, and they would fight, Beerus. But until that day comes where we have more information, everything that we is just speculation.
Definitely. And I do want to say, if anyone has anything to add on to this, if you guys are for Team Vegito or Team Beerus, in terms of power, in terms of growth and potential, let us know down below. Gentlemen, I do want to say thank you so much for having this discussion with me. It was great to hear your feedback. And again, for all of you guys out there, make sure to go on ahead and subscribe to DevilArtemis. I'm going to go on ahead and link his channel down below. He is a voice actor. And if you may really fast, why don't you go on ahead and give us a demonstration? And let's go on ahead and bring back, as they call him, Pedophile Cell. So Pedophile Cell, if you have anything to add on to who DevilArtemis is, could you just give us a little bit of a sample?
Hello everyone, my name is DevilArtemis. I have a Dragon Ball content channel. I do scenarios, spoilers, topic discussions, occasional voice acting in the Cell games.
And it doesn't matter who's stronger, because I'll suck them both dry. They will fear the very name that is Pedophile Cell. Oh yeah.
And of course, guys, my good friend Daishinkan Emish, if you can give us a sample of what you're all about, you have the floor. And if you have any voices that you can do that I don't know of, I mean, it's all you
I
right
wish
now.
I could do Cell that good.
I'm gonna suck you dry.
Suck you dry. No, but guys, I would say just check out the Discord server. I'm very active there. It's UnrealEntGaming Discord server, but we do a lot of interactions where we discuss topics like this, mainly Dragon Ball, but I do like to discuss other animes as well, Attack on Titan, My Hero Academia, etc., etc. So I'll catch you guys on the server.
Thank you all for watching, guys. If you guys are fans, don't forget to subscribe, slap a like on the video if you guys enjoyed, and we'll be seeing you all in the next video. Take it easy, guys. Peace.